Welcome back to our series on every version of Ahsoka's Rebel sabers available. So far we've looked at the Disney toy version, the original Legacy version, and the new Legacy V2 bundle. Before we move on to the high-end custom models available from third-party makers, I want to take a look at one model that lives in a weird space in between the two. With the licensed sabers, Disney and Hasbro typically try to provide an affordable option, copying the overall look and feel of the hilt with an easy-to-use one-button control for just that character's color and sounds. And they try to keep the price under $200 per hilt, or about $280 for the Hasbro Force FX Elite. The custom market sabers, on the other hand, try to give you the most modern electronics available, and as close to screen accurate as they can manage, at the cost of, well, a higher price. For a pair of curved Ahsoka sabers, with Pixel electronics, the price starts at $600 and can go up to over $2,000. Now, if you want to stay closer to that $200 price range, but want the latest customizable Pixel electronics, TXQ offers two options that hit that sweet spot. Typically, TXQ manufactures the same hilts for all their resellers, and allows each reseller to differentiate based on price, customer service, and marketing. But they do occasionally make hilt designs that are exclusive to a certain reseller. For Ahsoka, TXQ has two different non-replica inspired by hilts. One that's exclusive to Art Sabers, and one for NSabers. The folks at NSabers were kind enough to send one of theirs over for a review, so that's what we're going to look at today. NSabers calls this model the Ashoka SE. Price is $130 for a single baselet, $230 for either a pair of baselet or a single SN Pixel, or $430 for a pair of SN Pixels. Compared to the entry-level generic designs from the same vendor, these Ahsoka-themed ones are only a few dollars more for arguably a much prettier design. And at roughly $300 less than a pair of TXQ's more screen-accurate Ahsoka set, it's a much more affordable way to get your hands on some Ahsoka-themed sabers. You also have the option of combining two of these hilts into a staff, but you only get the coupler if you buy them both at the same time as a pair. I only have one, so I can't show you that, but Lightsaber Culture has a great review showing off the staff options. Like almost all TXQ sabers, it comes in the traditional cardboard box with the NSabers branding. Inside you get the hilt, the blade, which will be either pixel or baselet depending on which model you've gotten, a baselet blade plug, a display stand that we'll show you in a minute, the instruction manual, which I have some very strong opinions on, a USB-A to USB-C charging cable, a metal NSabers plaque, a tool bag with a hex wrench and some retention screws, and for some unknown reason, some cheap cotton gloves. Most people just ignore these. For TXQ's prop replica sabers, they use a custom machined curved hilt to get the look of the sabers. It looks great, even if it is a little bit thicker than it should be, but with everything being custom, that's where you get that $600 price point. So for this Ahsoka SE set, the way they keep the price under control is to keep the hilt a cylinder. And they give it the same visual styling with the black inlay, the silver diamonds, striping to mimic the grip, and the bowl-shaped emitter. And they add in the design element of her head markings around the switch to give it that extra spice of character. It ends up being still a very beautiful saber, but much simpler, much easier to manufacture, and therefore much cheaper. It also has the benefit that being a straight saber, it's much easier to spin around and catch. So if you want to use them for a lot of combat or spinning, these actually can be a better option, in addition to being cheaper. Honestly, my only real criticism of this design is that the diamonds stick out a little bit more than they should. When you rub your hand over it side to side, you can't really feel anything, because the way they did it, they just shaved off a portion of the cylinder to get the curves. So when you go this way, it's going along the plane of the cylinder. There's nothing to snag. But if you run your hand up and down, you go from a flat surface to these points that stick up, and they're kind of abrasive and catch your fingers. It would have been really, really nice if they had shaved these down or rounded them off. It's not a huge deal. It's not sharp enough to cut you. It's just a little bit uncomfortable. If you want to attach the blade, you have to add the retention screws from that bag of parts that they include. As you can see, one side of the screw is flat, while the other side can fit into the hex wrench. So you slip it onto the wrench, align it with that, and screw it in. Not far enough for it to come through on the other side. Then you do the same thing on the other side. That way you have one screw on either side. Again, there's another hole here. You don't need a third piece for the retention. If you really want to, you can put a retention screw in that hole, but you don't really need a third pressure point for the blade retention. And with a silver screw in a brass hole, it just looks kind of weird and off. Then you take your blade, take off the cap. It comes with some protective film in the blade, so you just remove that. Then you have a nice clean blade ready to install. The one I have here is a pixel blade, and you can see the pixel pins inside the hilt. So you just slide it in until those are nice and snug. Then you use your hex wrench to tighten it up. Just do it until it's a little bit snug. You don't have to be super tight. If you do it too hard, you can damage the blade. So just make it nice and snug, and that'll keep it nice in place. Then it lights up nice and smooth. While we're here, this is a good time to talk about that blade plug that comes with it. As you can see, this is a baselit blade plug. There's no LEDs inside of it, but our saber is a pixel saber. Now, normally I'm really annoyed when they include a baselit blade plug with a pixel saber, because there's no way to actually light it up. However, in this case, if you look inside, you'll see that when you turn it on, there actually are 8 tiny LEDs inside of it that light up on the outside. Now, these are not strong enough to light up a whole blade, but if you drop in a blade plug, it's plenty to light that up. And as you cycle through the blade colors, you'll see that all of the blade colors shine through just fine and look really nice. So in this case, it's not a problem to have a baselit blade plug. The thing that is a little weird is that the blade plug that they use doesn't actually have anything to do with the Ahsoka saber. It's just a generic design, and it's a complete crapshoot on what blade plug you're gonna get. Some people who have ordered a pair have gotten 2 silver or 2 gold or a gold and a silver. It looks like they just randomly pick 2 and throw it in. There's no rhyme or reason. Then again, not everybody uses plugs, so probably not a deal killer to most folks. You can also screw off this brass bowl emitter. I don't know why you would need to. I guess if you really wanted to tinker with it and put a different emitter on here, it's probably compatible with other TXQ emitters. This is my first TXQ, so I'm not certain about that. But you can take it off if you want to. On the other end of the hilt, there's actually 2 ways to take off this pommel. If you want to recharge the saber, you unscrew it down to this striped area. That will reveal the end of your electronics core where you have the USB-C charger available. So you just take the USB-C end of that cable that comes with it, plug it in there, plug the other end into a USB-A wall adapter, and you can charge it that way. If you don't want to charge it and you instead want to attach a coupler, then you don't remove the entire pommel, you just remove this silver portion at the end, which screws off separately. That gives you plenty of room for the speaker and room to attach that coupler that will let you put 2 of these into a staff configuration. And you'll notice when the pommel's on that there's a nice big hole in the end to let the sound out. Finally, if you want to remove the TXQ saber core, whether to switch between a baselit and a pixel core or just to access the SD card, you just need to remove this 1 screw right here. And then just press gently down on the switch to push it down from that cavity there. And then you just slide it right out. This core includes the blade connector, the switch, the SD card, the speaker, everything's right there together. So if you take this pixel core, replace it with a baselit one or a next year's model whenever it comes out, that lets you reuse this exact same hilt. It also lets you buy empty hilts and just reuse that same electronics in the other hilts to save some money, which is nice. So if you do want to put new sound fonts on it or modify it, this is the SD card that you would remove. Put that in your computer and you can modify that. I don't have a tutorial on how to do that yet, but if you do a search on YouTube for SN Pixel 4 configuration, you'll get a lot of tutorials on how to do that. When you want to put it back in, you just slide it back in until that switch lines up. Then you take the flat end of this, put it back in there. Now normally I'll screw it by hand initially, just nice and gently, just to make sure that that is lined up. When you can see that it's going up into the right place, you can take your hex key and tighten it back the rest of the way. You'll see it pushes that button back up into place. And again, don't do this super, super tight. You don't want to break your electronics core, just enough until it's snug. And then replace the pommel and you're off to the races. Before we look at the operation, let's take a quick look at that display stand that comes with it. It comes flat packed in 3 pieces. The holder portions have a very thin piece of protective material that'll need to do with a nice clear piece of acrylic. The coating on the base is more opaque, but it still peels off in the same way. It's just a little difficult to pry up initially and doesn't come off entirely in one piece easily. Once you've got it off, you take the tabs on the stands, slide them into the holes, and you've got a decent looking little display stand. Now the center of it looks pretty ugly, but that of course is because that's where they want you to put this metal plaque. This comes with any TXQ saber you get, but obviously the logo on the plaque is going to be different based on which reseller you get it from. What you would do is peel off this piece on the back, and then there would be adhesive on there, and then you can just glue it into place right there. So then you would have a stand that is much prettier and shows off the company that you bought it from. Now obviously this would look much nicer if it were engraved with the name of the character whose saber you have, or even if it were a blank piece that you could have engraved yourself later. But I guess from a marketing perspective, I understand wanting to have the reseller's name somewhere on the product. Although it's a little weird, if you buy a Disney saber from Best Buy, you're not going to have Best Buy's logo on your saber. Go figure. Now let's talk about how to operate the saber. Every TXQ saber comes with a manual like this. Obviously the logo on the front will be different based on who you buy it from, but I'm fairly certain that the manual itself is written by TXQ and it's the same one you get regardless of who you buy it through. Now, to save money, they don't want to have separate manuals for every single saber, so they include in the same manual the instructions for using a Profi, an SM Pixel, and the baselit version, all in the same manual. So first you have to know which kind of saber electronics you have to know which section to look at, and then it has a different section based on what kind of controls you have on your saber. So already it can get very confusing figuring out where to look in the manual to find what you want. And then once you find it, the instructions that they give has extremely tiny text, and while it does technically tell you the information you need, it tells it to you in just about the hardest way it can. This is one of the reasons people love the Hasbro and Disney sabers over these custom ones, is because they're so much easier to use. These ones provide a whole lot of customizability, but they don't make it easy for you. And honestly, it doesn't need to be as hard as this instruction manual makes it. So let me give you the quick start guide version. First, to wake it from sleep, you just hold down the button for 3 seconds. Power on. Until that ring lights up. Now for these single button sabers, that ring is what you rely on for most of the operations. When the blade is off, holding that down for 1 flash mute on will change it between mute, high volume, low volume, and the low volume. If you hold it down for 2 flashes, it'll change the boot effects, which is what happens when you turn it on and turn it off, how it lights up. So by default, it's just a straight light up and turn off. But it comes pre-programmed with 10 other options for how that blade can light up. I don't want to go through all of them, but here's a few. So those are called boot effects. What happens when it boots up and turns off? If you hold it down for 3 flashes, you can change the blade effects, which is what happens to the blade when it's already turned on. Again, I don't want to bore you by cycling through all of them, but here are a few of them. The rainbow blade, that's got to be the most popular one. Really cool looking. So those are the blade effects, what happens when the blade is already on. Finally, if you do 4 flashes, it'll change the sound font. Now technically the sound font is changing what sounds it makes, but on these newer ones, it can also set for each sound font the boot effect and the blade effect and the blade color. I think this one comes with like 27 different sound fonts, so we're not going to go through all of them, but here's a quick highlight of a couple of them. 1, 2, 3, 4. It says red, but this is definitely pink.
Master wouldn't do.
See, this one puts the blade effect on there along with the color and sounds.
I am told it is the dark saber.
Leia.
Temple guard. Ventress. Ayla Sakura.
So there are dozens of sound fonts that come on it, and if you pull out the SD card, you can add more, change them, come up with your own. If you search on YouTube for SN Pixel 4, you'll come up with a lot of tutorials to show you how. The only annoying thing about this out of the box is that this saber cord does not come with an Ahsoka sound font. You can pick one of the other sound fonts and change the blade to white, which is what I've done here, but there's no Ahsoka font. So if you want it to sound like hers, you have to go out and get a font yourself and put it on here. The reason they do this is that, as we saw earlier, that electronics core that's inside of this can be used between dozens of their sabers. So instead of having a separate core pre-programmed for each character's blade, they just have one standard one that they include with any of the hilts that use that same saber core. For most of the basic entry-level ones, it's not a big deal since you're getting a basic generic hilt. It's just since this one is technically themed to a character and that character's font's not on there, kind of annoying. But it's still so customizable that it's not that much of a limiting factor. Finally, if you have the blade turned off and you hold it down for 5 flashes,
Power off.
it'll turn it back into sleep mode. So those are the things you can control with the blade off. Now once you turn the blade on, if you just tap the button once, it'll do that blaster deflection noise. There's about 5 or 6 places along the blade that it'll randomly light up when it does the noise. So it makes it seem like you're blocking a blaster bolt with your lightsaber. If you let it flash once, it'll enter this lockup mode, which simulates if you're clashing sabers with somebody else and getting that lockup effect. And then you just tap it to get back out of that. Now by default, if you hit it with something, you're gonna get that flash on clash sound. If you want to turn that off while the blade is on, you let it go 3 times. 1, 2, 3.
Flash off.
And it's turned that off. So if you're doing some combat choreography or you just don't like that noise, you can turn it off. 3 flashes,
Flash off.
turns it back on. And of course, 4 flashes, turns it off. So the majority of what this instruction booklet tries to tell you, you can see in one simple table. You just need to look at whether the blade's on or off and how many flashes you let it go for. Of course, with the SNV4, you also have some motion controls. So that makes it a little bit more complicated. The easiest one is the twist on and twist off. So if you hold it and twist it, it'll turn on, twist it again to turn off. That is an amazing effect to have if you're doing it intentionally. You can just, hold it out and then off it goes. It's kind of annoying when you're not trying to do it and you're just, trying to wave it around or something and it comes on accidentally. You can turn that off on the SD card if you want to. But most people love that feature. The next few have to do with the direction that you're holding the saber, up or down. If you hold it upwards, you hold down the button and you twist.
Quinlan, pause.
That's your shortcut to changing the sound font.
Reborn. The Butcher. Temple Guard. Star Killer.
Makes it really easy to cycle through a whole bunch real quick. If you do that same motion, having it pointing it up, hold the button down and twist, while the blade is already on, it'll just fire off one of the force effects or one of the sound effects for that font that you already have selected. If you turn it upside down and have it pointing with the blade down, and you do that same motion, hold it down and twist, it'll turn on music. And you get that nice, ominous Star Wars music. Do it again, and it'll turn off. If you do that same motion, blade facing down, hold the button and turn when the blade's already on, it's going to change the blade color. Now it doesn't go through a cycling mode. You have to do that one time for each time you want to change the color.
Color switch. Color switch. Color switch. Color switch. Color switch.
But again, it gives you a nice fast way to change the color. The last three motion effects, one is the easy one. If you just hit it against something, you're gonna get that flash on clash effect that we talked about earlier, and we already know how to turn that off. If you hold down the button and hit something, it's gonna give you that glowing tip. Now the idea there is, if you're trying to cut through a door and you have it pressed up against it, it'll be like you're trying to melt through the door. So that's that melt effect. Although they call it a drag effect. Finally, if you hold the button down and stab, just the center portion lights up. And again, you tap it to get out of that. So those are the motion controls. Again, a lot simpler to see them on a table, to see what you can do with the blade already on, what you can do with the blade already off. Now let's do some really quick comparisons. With the Disney Legacy Bundle, you get some really heavy, thick, chunky hilts and very basic electronics. This costs you $320 for the pair, with the blades included. But they're really heavy, not very accurate. For $230, you either get a pair of these baselit or $430 for a pair of the Pixel ones. Much, much lighter, much easier to hold, and the electronics in them are much, much more advanced. With TXQ's $600 character sabers, it's lighter than the Disney one by far, a lot smaller, looks much nicer, has those modern electronics, but again, you're looking at $600 for a pair, as opposed to $430 for a pair of these. So with these, you get something lighter, less expensive, with the same electronics, and the ability to make it into a staff. I'll also point out that the one thing that I really don't like about the character sabers from TXQ is you'll notice there's nothing that lights up on that button. So everything we just showed you about waiting for this number of flashes or that number of flashes, you have to hold that down and guess how many flashes. So these, if you're not using the motion sensing, are a pain in the butt to operate. Whereas this one, with the light up ring, very easy to operate. Well, once you get past the instruction manual. And once you get to the replicas from other companies, you get a lot thinner and closer to screen accurate than the TXQ saber ones. But again, these are very, very pricey. So every benefit that this has over the TXQ one, as far as price and ease of use, is true about those ones as well. So if you want a nice budget option that you can use as a staff, will give you all the modern electronics, and is reasonably easy to work with, this is a really nice option. It's cheap, it's effective, and damn it, it's just pretty. I'll have a link with a coupon code in the description in case you want a little bit of a discount. And if you are interested in seeing more of the expensive options, subscribe to the channel, and over the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be reviewing the TXQ character sabers, as well as the more expensive ones from Ultimate Workshop, Elf, KR. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next one.